Hi everyone, welcome to Technology World Hub. My name is Anil. Today I am going to discuss one of the important topic, that is different architecture of Selenium, Playwright and Cypress. So let's start this. So architecture expand Selenium versus Playwright versus Cypress. In the world of test automation, choosing the right tools and frameworks can greatly impact the success and efficiency of your testing efforts. Selenium has been the most popular choice for web application testing, but with the introduction of Selenium 4, which was introduced in October 2021, as well as the emergence of other frameworks non-Selenium like Playwright and Cypress, testers now have a multiple options to consider. In this session, we will analyze the architecture diagram of Selenium 3, Selenium 4, Playwright and Cypress. Okay, so let's start. Let's start with Selenium 3 architecture diagram. A Selenium request is sent. If you will see the diagram, how exactly it works. A Selenium request is sent from the Selenium client component, that is Selenium client libraries. Next, the request is received by JSON wire protocol over HTTP. So in Selenium 3, the, the request and response was transferred through HTTP protocol. So the request which was sent by the Selenium client component, that is Selenium client libraries, are received by JSON wire protocol over HTTP. Then secured by the browser driver. That means it will send to the browser driver. Browser drivers, different browser drivers like Chrome driver, Firefox driver, Edge driver, Safari driver, IE driver. Okay. Then afterwards, the request command is delivered to a real browser. So the browser driver will send the request to the real browser. Again over using HTTP server. Okay. Over HTTP server, browser driver will send the request to real browser. When the automation is performed, okay, automation like any kind of action is performed, when the automation is complete, okay, so what happens, like browser driver will send the request to the real browser. What does that mean? There exactly the automation is performed. Okay, so once after the automation is performed, when the automation is complete, a response travel back to the browser driver. So real browser will send a response to the browser driver through over HTTP server. Okay, HTTP over HTTP server. Okay, then what happens? Browser driver will send the response to JSON wire protocol and Selenium client. Understood? That's how the architecture. Okay, this is about Selenium 3 architecture. Then next, we'll discuss about Selenium 4 architecture. How exactly? Selenium 4 is almost similar, whereas in Selenium 4, W3C protocol has been used. Unlike Selenium 3, Selenium 4 has direct communication between the client and server because of the W3C protocol. W3C, that is World Wide Web Consortium. Protocol was introduced because all the web browsers followed the W3C standards, and also all the browser drivers followed the W3C standards. Okay, all browser and all browser drivers follow W3C standards. To standardize the communication, the JSON wire protocol was replaced by W3C in Selenium 4. This approach provides better communication with the browsers, stability, and common code, that is, no browser specific code required. Okay, so that's how the Selenium 4 architecture has been developed. Okay, next, Playwright. See, Playwright, if you see, Playwright communicates all requests between client and server through a single WebSocket connection. There, the request response or communication was happening through HTTP protocol. Like in Selenium 3, it was JSON wire protocol, and in Selenium 4, W3C protocol. Like that, in Playwright, the communication happens through WebSockets, request response, both, which stays in place until test execution is completed. So in Selenium, what was happening? Like for every action, there is a request, and after the action, there will be a response. And after request response, that connection will terminate. But in case of Playwright, WebSocket will establish a connection, a single WebSocket connection that will stay in place until test execution is completed. Okay, that's why it is little bit faster and avoid the flaky test. Next, we'll discuss what is the difference between HTTP request response and WebSocket request response. Later we'll discuss. So let's discuss now Cypress architecture. If you will see, this is the Cypress architecture. Okay, just observe, then we are going to discuss. Okay, Cypress engine directly operates inside the browser. See, Cypress engine, Cypress test, application under test. That is, what is happening? Cypress engine directly operates inside the browser. Therefore, it is the browser that is executing your test code. So, browser will execute the test code. Okay. Cypress can access both the front-end and back-end applications, which enables it to act on real-time incidents on the applications and at the exact time execute tasks outside the browser that requires additional special privilege. Okay. So basically, what do we know? Like Cypress can access both the front-end and back-end applications. Okay. Then next, the Node server and browser. Node server and browser. Okay, Node server and browser. Communication are through WebSocket. See here, if you see here, there is a WebSocket. After begin with proxy, then after that WebSocket. So the Node server is, let's say, Node.js, and browser. Okay, Node server and browser. Communications are through the WebSocket. Again, here is WebSocket. So WebSocket means single connection, which starts execution after the proxy is created. So basically, WebSocket will start execution after the proxy is created. So begin with proxy. That's why initially it will begin with proxy, then WebSocket connection will be established. Okay, which starts execution after the proxy is created. Cypress sends HTTP requests and responses from the Node server to the browser. Okay, it sends HTTP request and response. See, HTTP request and response is there, which will be transferred between whom? Between Node server to the browser. Okay, Cypress has control over all the commands that run on and off the browsers. What happens here? Cypress has control over all the commands that run on and off the browser. Cypress has control. It directly talks with the operating system to capture screenshots, record videos, access the network layer, and perform file system operations. Okay, Cypress has that kind of capability or functionality. It directly talks with the operating system to capture screenshots, record videos, access the network layer, and perform file system operations. Okay, that's about Cypress architecture. So next we are going to discuss what is difference between WebSocket versus HTTP connection diagram. Okay, in HTTP connection architectures, tools like Selenium sends each command as a separate HTTP request and receives JSON responses. Okay, it will send request and gets JSON response for each request. So every action, that is opening the browser, clicking an element, etc., is sent as a separate HTTP request. When every request is completed, the connection between the server and client will be terminated and implies being re-established for the next request. Okay, so in HTTP request, what happens? After the action, like we'll send a request, after the action, the response will be sent. So after request response, that connection will be terminated. So for another request response, again the connection will establish. Because of ending and recreating a connection for each request, the overall test execution may be slow and flaky because we are reconnecting for each request or each action. So that's why the overall test execution may be slower and flaky. In the other hand, in WebSocket architecture, what happens? Used by, let's say, Playwright, all requests between client and server through a single WebSocket connection. So all the requests or all the actions happen through a single WebSocket connection, which stays in place until test execution is completed. This reduces the points of failure and allows commands to be sent quickly on a single connection. So what happens actually? This reduces the points of failure and allows commands to be sent quickly on a single connection. So commands sent quickly on a single connection. Okay, so that's how it is. So that's it, guys. So this is the architecture for Selenium, Playwright, and Cypress. Okay, Selenium 3 architecture, Selenium 4 architecture, Playwright architecture, Cypress architecture, and the difference between WebSocket versus HTTP connection diagram. Okay, that's it, guys. I will come up with some new interesting topic. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Please like it, subscribe it, share with your friends and family. Thank you so much, guys.